Welcome to Big Business This Week. I'm Aisha McKenzie on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. We are in the first week of President Donald Trump's second term, and while many are trying to figure out how the new administration will affect them, we are getting clearer answers on how Trump's leadership will affect business, the markets, and your wallet. Here to break it all down is Barron's Ideas editor, Matt Peterson. Matt, thanks for joining us on Cheddar.
Thanks for having me.
So first, we want to start with, what are your thoughts on the first few days of Trump 2.0?
Well, Trump is basically delivering what he promised on the campaign trail. He ran on a platform of, big changes to business and the economy, to the way the government runs the economy, and he's trying to put it in place. But we still have yet to see where all these things are actually going, right? He signaled us a lot of priorities on tariffs, on deregulation and other things, but they haven't really hit the economy yet. So he actually needs to follow through.
All right, we're going to get to the tariffs in just a bit, but since Monday, like you said, he's delivering on a lot of things he said he would do. He has hit the ground running for this second term, setting the tone, and within hours of his inauguration, we saw that he revoked nearly 80 executive orders by the former president, a lot focused on DEI initiatives. So what were some of the notable moves that happened here with Trump and these revoked EOs?
Right. He went through and slashed a bunch of Biden-era orders. And there were, a number of DEI orders that he killed. He also focused on climate and energy, were other big themes of this. The practical effects of these are going to take a little while to see, but I think the important point here is to understand he's trying to sort of signal a new era in the way that government regulates business, and particularly energy. He wants to sort of liberate the energy industry, but that's actually going to take quite a lot of time, right? Biden wasn't actually able to sort of make the pumps flow as much as he wanted to, and Trump really won't be able to do that either, despite his promises.
And talking about investing and really putting business forward, there was a lot of talk about investing in AI, which is something that we all are used to at this point now if you use social media or on the internet. But I want to talk about Elon Musk. He seemingly is making his first negative comments about one of Trump's first major moves that he's making. So the president announced a major $500 billion investment to AI. So Oracle, OpenAI, and SoftBank, they're all pledging that money, about $100 billion to start forming Stargate. But Musk is saying they don't have the money for that. So what can you tell us about that announcement and Musk's reaction? And, what are people thinking about Musk speaking against the president so soon, or about his plans with OpenAI?
Right. There is a long-standing feud between Elon Musk and Sam Altman, who runs OpenAI. The two just have, a lot of bad blood going back many years, and have alternate visions for how they want to proceed on AI. I think Trump is really getting some good advice here that he ought to focus on AI in these first days of his administration. The stock market loves AI. And one of the biggest consequences of some of Trump's deregulatory moves may be to free up the ability of companies to build these, new AI data centers and get them close to the energy sources that they want. As far as the Stargate project goes, we took a look at this at Barron's and actually came to the conclusion that Elon might be right here. It's not really clear where the money is coming from in this consortium of people that are pushing this new, $100 billion, $500 billion over several years project. Now they say, trust us, we've got the money, we've come up with similar amounts before, and that very well may be true. But this is one of these cases, with a lot of government announcements, you want to really see them actually show the money before you make a big bet on whether this thing is actually going to come to fruition.
Right, because $500 billion, that's a lot of money to start with this project. But for everyday Americans who are listening to this big announcement, a lot of people are focused on their groceries, gas, and all that. What does that mean, investing in AI for regular folk?
Unfortunately, it doesn't mean very much for regular folks. The AI story is a business story. It's going to, drive big enhancements in the way that businesses operate internally, and a little bit with how they deal with their customers. That stuff is going to kind of come later on. Everybody's familiar with the hallucinations that the chatbots have, and their weird answers that they give people. The AI has been more useful for companies sort of automating some of their internal processes that were kind of expensive. But if you're looking for immediate relief on the price of eggs, on the prices at the pump, oil prices go staying a little bit high. Unfortunately, AI is not really going to do it for you, and you need some kind of bigger action in the economy to make a dent on those cost of living issues.
So let's talk about bigger things in the economy for us here in America. So we talked about tariffs, that Trump calls that one of his favorite words. So we've been hearing about a lot of tariffs from our neighboring countries, Mexico and Canada. Trump is thinking of imposing a 25% tariff on goods from Mexico and Canada, and then a 10% tariff on all Chinese goods starting February 1st. So, of course, we have seen none of that happen just yet. It's something he's been talking about even prior to him getting elected. What should people expect when it comes to these possible tariffs? Is the relief there?
Look, there's a very long list of potential tariffs that Trump has talked about, in the last year and a half or so. One of the things I think that needs to happen before we actually see any tariffs is that the Federal Reserve needs to hold its meeting next week. They have said they're very worried about the tariffs. They use more cloaked language, but that's what they're getting at. So once we're clear of that, the end of next week, then I think we may actually start to see some things come and take place. The one that people have pointed to as potentially the most likely near-term tariff is probably with Canada. Trump seems to be really mad at the Canadians for reasons that honestly kind of escape me. But he, is very frustrated with the Liberal government of Justin Trudeau, which is basically collapsed over the last 2 weeks. And what that means is that government is in a very poor position to respond. And it means Trump can, really exert a lot of leverage over them. But this tariff has the potential to be very consequential to American consumers because Canada is the place where we import most of our imported oil from. We buy a ton of oil from them. And if Trump makes that more expensive, that has a pretty direct consequence on people's bottom line here. So this issue could come to a head very, very quickly. And then moving a little bit further out, the date to watch is April 1st, when the government has to issue a bunch of reports that Trump called for in one of his first executive orders. And that could be the starting point for a lot of other additional tariffs.
And you started with talking about the Fed. We know that Powell and Trump don't have the best of relationships. Do you think that's going to be an issue going forward when it comes to bringing down these prices or figuring out when it comes to job growth and just the economy overall?
Trump's relationship with Jerome Powell at the Fed is going to be a big, big flashpoint going forward. Trump's nominee for Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, got asked about this at his nomination hearings, and he defended Trump's right to have a say in what the Fed does. That's breaking longstanding tradition of presidents really just leaving that issue of interest rates off the table entirely. The Fed is basically on kind of a hair trigger here about inflation. Inflation has been running a little bit hotter than anybody would like it to be, closer to 3% than the 2% the Fed wants it to be. And, Powell has basically signaled that if he sees stuff that raises the price of goods in a long-term way, he's going to step in. And that's really tariffs, right? That's a really direct conflict between Trump and the president. And between Trump and the Fed. And if Trump somehow makes it harder for the Fed to start fighting inflation, that could do all sorts of long-term damage to the economy because people will start thinking that actually stuff is going to get more expensive over time. And so they'll start trying to buy it right now. And that's this kind of damaging, self-fulfilling cycle that the Fed has been really trying to fight over these last couple of years.
That panic buying. So I want to talk about the most impactful factor for investors, as you noted in your most recent piece for Barron. So what is that? What do you think?
That's going to be the deficit and the bond market. This is at the background of a lot of concern about stocks this year, because what we have seen since Donald Trump became likely to win the presidency, even before he actually won, was that the rates on long-term government debt, the 10-year note and longer maturities have gone up, and they've come close to 5%, which is this big sort of psychological threshold that people think could start forcing sales in the stock market. And also it hits the real economy. It makes mortgages more expensive. It makes car loans more expensive. It just sort of slows everything down and comes up the works. And unfortunately, it's really hard to see how Trump can arrest this movement. Now, maybe if he backs off on the tariff pushes, some of these rates will come down because traders will start to see a brighter future for the American growth and inflation story going ahead. But unfortunately, Congress has a big say in this too, and how they handle the deficit. And that's a whole other train wreck that we can get into if you want. But basically, unless we get the debt situation under control, the long-term pressure on these rates is going to stay up.
That is something we have to keep an eye on. My last question for you, Matt. A lot has already happened in not even a first full week of Trump's presidency, but what do you think will happen in the first 100 days?
Oh boy, that's a tough one. I think we're going to see some real action on immigration issues. I think, Trump has been talking up these sort of ICE raids, deportation raids we haven't seen yet. So I would expect those to start hitting. That's also something that businesses are very focused on because, they could see a big chunk of their labor force disappear, another sort of inflation in the Fed story that we're seeing. There's got to be a lot of this kind of nuts and bolts governing that Congress needs to do. They need to extend federal funding. We could have another shutdown fight very soon. We could have a debt ceiling fight very soon. Trump he just wants to get those off his plate as soon as possible, but it might be harder than he thinks. We may see some fireworks with Jerome Powell, as I said, and we'll also see some bigger pushes towards deregulation. I expect we'll see some sort of loosening of the reins on crypto that industry has been waiting for. That's probably in the near-term cards as well.
So there's a number of things that can happen in these 100 days. All right, Matt Peterson, Barron's Ideas editor, thanks for joining us on Cheddar. Well, coming up, what we are learning from Davos, Switzerland after the 2025 annual meeting of the World Economic Forum took place this week. Stay with us. Welcome back to Big Business This Week. Every January, some of the world's most powerful leaders head out to the Swiss Alps. World and business leaders arrive in Davos, Switzerland, but they're not there to ski. They are there to attend the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. The meeting's objective, orienting global leaders on the critical issues of the year ahead. Here to break down the things we need to know from this year's meeting is Zoya Sheftkolovich, reporter at Politico. Zoya, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
So let's start with the basics for those who don't know. What is the goal of the World Economic Forum?
Ostensibly the goal is to discuss a theme. Every year that theme is slightly different. All of these world leaders and business titans and NGOs gather in this one quite remote place in the Swiss Alps, and they meet to discuss things on panels, but actually everyone knows that the real purpose of the meeting is to have those deals behind the scenes. It's to meet people who you otherwise would not be able to meet in one place. It's to shake hands, swap business cards, and make deals.
All right, so you're actually there right now. So tell us a little bit about what a day is like there for participants.
It's an intense period of time, all of these important people in one place at a time. So things often start at 7 a.m. or earlier with various breakfast roundtables where folks as diverse as will.i.am will meet with chiefs of the WHO and business leaders and Google executives and members of the government of various countries. Things will continue all the way through the day with panels on the main stage in the World Economic Forum Congress Center, but also lots of sideline events happening at various houses. Many countries will take out a house. So, for instance, I'm coming to you today right now from Ukraine House, which is on the promenade on the main street in Davos. And all sorts of events will happen in these houses over the course of the day. And then in the evening, there's always networking reception. After networking reception, things all kind of escalate into a nightcap at various locations. And then finally, often people will end up in Barry's Piano Bar, which is a famed Davos institution where a certain pianist will play into the early hours of the morning. So it really is a very long day for Davos participants who are doing it the full kind of Davos distance.
It's long, but it seems like it's very productive. But as you were saying, it's not just the C-level folks that are in attendance there. You wrote a really great article really breaking down the 11 tribes. This was on Politico of Davos. So can you break down the idea for us? Because you show the hierarchy of all those who are in attendance there.
Yes, so there is a hierarchy known as the badge hierarchy, which exists in Davos. There are the white badge folks, which are the most fancy of folks. There are a limited number of white badges that get given out to participants. And then there are other badged folks who are much less fancy than those, who are getting less free food and fewer invitations. You've got the orange badges, which belong to the media. So I myself have an orange badge. They tend to stay in slightly less fancy accommodation, often a bit further out, and they may need to take a fair distance to get into Davos town itself. You then have other folks who are the bag carriers for the various politicians who come into town. They have the green badges. And then you've got people with all sorts of stripes and additional elements that occur as well. So there's all sorts of folks who are in Davos at this time, and they've all got a different badge and different access to various things. Most people don't actually have access to most of the events that are held in the Congress Center, for instance. They are kind of limited to what's happening on the promenade.
Oh, I really encourage people to read your article because I love seeing that breakdown of the 11 tribes. Really gives you a view of what happens in Davos. But tell us a little bit about the temperature there. What are some of the hottest discussions that are happening this year at the forum?
This year, the election of Donald Trump has been really the thing that has hung over the entirety of the forum. So all of the panels effectively have a Trump angle to them, whether those are panels about AI and crypto, or if they're panels about health or panels about environment, because obviously the election of Trump and the fact that he was inaugurated just a couple of days ago now has really changed the way that the world is going to form and function over the next 4 years. But definitely tech is a key theme. It has been for a long time, but this year in particular, it feels especially pertinent. And that's everything from crypto to AI and how to deal with the new emerging technologies, how to ensure safety, how to ensure election integrity. Those are all key topics of conversation as well.
And speaking of AI, we've been discussing here on Cheddar about Trump's big investment, the $500 billion investment into AI infrastructure. So what are leaders saying about it? Is there a buzz of excitement when it comes to investing in artificial intelligence?
It depends on where the leaders are from. So the European contingent here is actually quite concerned, because what this investment means is that it blows all of their efforts out of the water. It means that they're going to really struggle with competing for such a large investment. They don't have anything near that. So the Europeans are concerned. The Americans are ebullient. You've got particularly American AI folks, who are absolutely overjoyed about this announcement and are really welcoming that cash injection and know that this is going to mean that their companies are going to be out in front.
So what are people saying about Trump's tariffs, the different people from the various countries that are in Davos? Is there any conversation surrounding that as well, and what they think about these tariffs and where they may land?
I think there is some degree of, some people don't believe those tariffs are coming. So they know that Donald Trump has threatened tariffs, but there is this belief that it's actually just a bargaining chip and the tariffs won't necessarily come. So I think there is some degree of denial, perhaps, among those people. But others are very concerned. So the Europeans are very concerned. They feel it's unfair that they may have tariffs or measures placed against them. And they worry about the ability of their industries to compete, considering the fact that they're already sluggish. So the German economy is sluggish. The French economy is sluggish. They're already very much struggling, and they are concerned that any further tariffs or any further measures from Trump may push them over the edge.
Okay, so I want to get into the talk about Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, reconciling with Elon Musk, even calling him our Einstein. So are any people talking about Elon Musk there? Is he a topic of conversation at Davos at all?
He is a topic of conversation. Look, I think the bottom line is that he's a key part of the next administration, at least for now, and people are kissing the ring. So it's not surprising that Jamie Dimon has come out with these comments, despite his previous enmity for Elon Musk. I think that makes sense. It is what we're hearing all up and down the promenade in Davos. Everyone is falling into line for now. I think there is an expectation that it won't be too long before Elon Musk breaks with the Trump administration. We already saw a hint of that over the AI investment announcement, where he came out and slammed that announcement. So generally speaking, there is an expectation that it's going to be a short-lived romance, but people are waiting it out. And for now, they're not willing to break with Musk.
Zoya, we really appreciate your perspective from Davos. Well, coming up, the business news you may have missed, including what the future of TikTok holds in the U.S. after a very brief shutdown. Welcome back to Big Business This Week. Time now to bring in our friend Peter Green to give you some of the business news you may have missed. Always great to have you on, Peter.
Nice to see you again, Aisha.
So we have to talk about TikTok, of course. There was that big meltdown when the app shut down for about 12 hours in the U.S. Digital creators, small businesses, they were all worried about, what this would mean for their source of income. And there's still no definite answer. We have that 75-day extension from the president, but what is the future of this app?
Really good question. Trump says he'd like there to be a 50% U.S. owner. That sounds like an easy way for everybody to wiggle out of this. It doesn't really do anything about the national security concern, which was first raised by Trump in his first term, where he actually issued an executive order saying that ByteDance had to divest the TikTok operation to someone in the U.S. And then Biden rewrote that as a much stronger, more bulletproof order with Congress, and everybody passed it, Dems and Republicans. Then Trump had a meeting with a multi-millionaire donor to the Republican Party, guy who gave $92 million to Republican causes in the last election cycle. And suddenly he thought it was a great thing to keep TikTok on the air. What's going to happen to it? Most likely it'll muddle through. Most likely the people who left will come back and keep monetizing their audiences. But what's really interesting is what's happening to the parent company, ByteDance. ByteDance, Chinese company, very adjacent to the Communist Party. They want to become the leading AI company in Asia. They've been trying to get access to NVIDIA chips, which has been restricted also for national security reasons, by renting them from data centers. So now there's a new rule Biden put in his last week, blocking that from happening. But all of this comes as ByteDance is preparing for an IPO. The initial buyback of some shares from their private investors valued the company at $300 billion. People are saying the IPO could be worth as much as $700 billion and keep growing from there because TikTok is extremely popular. And as you've seen, it's all becoming now about merchandising. The TikTok store could rival Amazon or one of the other stores in Asia. So, at the end, Aisha, it's all about money.
It sure is. I mean, we honestly saw from the reaction of it being shut down, not even for a full day, that Americans want it. They want to use it, they want to monetize it, and they want to figure it out. But I want to go back to what you said about President Biden when it came to banning TikTok. So Congress passed it as a law. Trump wants to come in with an executive order, but it's really not that easy. It's not, especially when it's a law, correct?
Yeah, apparently. I think he might be able to delay this a little bit, but it's not really clear to use the word Trump, what trumps a law passed by Congress, whether an executive order can overturn that. Most of his executive orders have been to overturn earlier executive orders. So I think we're going to see this go back to the courts and probably pretty quickly right back up to the Supreme Court.
And lastly, we see that the TikTok CEO is really trying to buddy up to Trump, especially with the messages we saw on the app, praising the president for bringing the app back and hopefully having some long-term goal for the U.S. Do you think that is going to help the cause, especially with the current president we have now?
Absolutely. I mean, we have seen that raw power is all that counts here, and currying favor with the king is what matters. He's bent the GOP so far to his will in Congress. So, if he needs backup legally, he's got it. It's definitely going to help, and it seems the way forward. Zuckerberg, Musk, all these people have changed their allegiances over the last few years and have become loyal Trump devotees.
So we have to see what's going to happen with TikTok and the other apps. Peter Green, thank you so much for checking in with us. And check out our newsletter by going to cheddar.com/BBTW. And that's going to do it for us this week. But don't go away. Much more on Cheddar up next.